She staged a breakup to go viral while her toxic friends recorded. I didn't beg, I handed over my keys and said, "Wish granted. Don't call me." Their smirks turned to instant panic. Silence is a funny thing. When you are younger, silence feels like a void that needs to be filled with noise, with action, with people. But when you hit your 30s, silence becomes a commodity. It becomes peace. I am 34 years old, a software engineer who spends most of his days staring at lines of code, finding logic in chaos. I built my life around predictability. I like my coffee black, I like my mornings quiet, and I deeply value loyalty. I am not the kind of man who thrives on drama or grand, theatrical displays of emotion. I believe that love is something you build quietly, brick by brick, through consistency and shared respect. 3 years ago, I met Cassidy. She was 27 at the time, working 2 part-time jobs and trying to figure out her place in the world. We bumped into each other at a small, dimly lit bookstore downtown. She had dropped a stack of design magazines, and I helped her pick them up. It sounds like a cliché from a movie, but it was just a quiet, genuine moment. Back then, Cassidy was different. She wore oversized sweaters, her hair was usually pulled back in a messy bun, and she possessed this raw, unfiltered ambition that I found incredibly attractive. She wanted to be a graphic designer, but couldn't afford the tuition for the advanced courses she needed. In those early days, our relationship was simple. We would spend our Friday nights eating cheap takeout pizza on the floor of my apartment, talking about our dreams until 2 o'clock in the morning. She appreciated everything. If I brought her a single cup of coffee during her shift at the local cafe, her eyes would light up as if I had handed her a winning lottery ticket. She was grounded. She knew the value of $1, and she knew the value of someone showing up for her. I fell in love with that version of Cassidy. I fell in love with her drive, her humbleness, and the way she made my quiet life feel just a little bit warmer. I thought I had found my partner, the person I would eventually build a family with. I was ready to give her the world, or at least, the most stable, secure corner of it that I could provide. But looking back now, I realize that the Cassidy I fell in love with was perhaps just a temporary version of herself, molded by necessity and financial struggle. When you are broke, humility is often a survival tactic rather than a personality trait. I did not know that at the time. I just saw a woman who needed a solid foundation to stand on so she could reach her goals. And I was more than willing to be that foundation. I am a traditional guy in many ways. I believe that if you love a woman, you protect her, you provide for her, and you help her grow. So, I made a conscious decision to invest in our future together. I did not just want her to survive, I wanted her to thrive. That was my first mistake, assuming that gratitude would naturally evolve into lifelong loyalty. About a year into our relationship, Cassidy got an opportunity for a prestigious, 10-month internship at a high-end marketing agency. It was the break she had been praying for, the golden ticket into the corporate design world. The catch was brutal. It was completely unpaid. She was devastated. She sat on the edge of my bed, crying, saying she would have to turn it down because she could not afford to pay her rent and eat if she was working 40 hours a week for free. I did not even have to think about it. I told her to take the internship. I told her I would cover her rent, her groceries, and her utilities for the next 10 months. I made a decent salary as an engineer, but taking on the living expenses of 2 separate apartments in the city was not something I could do on my base pay alone. So, I took on freelance jobs. I scoured open-source platforms and took on extra coding projects for startup companies. For nearly a year, my routine was grueling. I would work my standard 9-to-5 job, come home, eat a quick dinner with Cassidy, and then sit back down at my computer from 8 o'clock in the evening until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. My eyes were permanently bloodshot. The glare of the monitor gave me chronic migraines. But every time I paid her $1,200 rent or handed her a couple of $100 for groceries and gas, I felt a quiet sense of pride. I was doing what a man is supposed to do. I was building our future. She would thank me, of course. She would massage my shoulders while I coded and tell me how lucky she was. But as the months dragged on, the nature of her gratitude began to shift. It became less profound, more routine. The late nights I spent working stopped being seen as a sacrifice and started being viewed as my normal baseline. I remember one specific night, about 8 months into the internship. I had just finished a brutal 70-hour work week. I was exhausted to my very bones. I fell asleep on the couch before we could watch the movie we had planned. The next morning, instead of understanding, she seemed mildly annoyed that I was always tired. It was a small comment, a tiny crack in the glass, but I ignored it. I told myself she was just stressed from the agency. I rationalized everything. I kept transferring the money. I kept writing the code. I kept sacrificing my peace and my health because I believed that once she got hired full-time, everything would balance out. We would finally enjoy the fruits of my labor together. I thought my actions were carving my name into her heart. I didn't realize I was just paying for the privilege of eventually being discarded. 8 months ago, the internship paid off. The agency offered Cassidy a full-time position with a very competitive salary. We celebrated. I thought we had finally crossed the finish line. I stopped taking freelance work, looking forward to getting my life, my sleep, and my girlfriend back. But instead of returning to the girl I knew, Cassidy began to metamorphose into someone entirely different. The environment at the agency was toxic, fueled by high stress, shallow appearances, and a culture of relentless comparison. Her income changed, and with it, her entire value system. The oversized sweaters were replaced by designer labels. The quiet weekends ordering takeout were suddenly deemed boring. But the most significant and destructive change was her screen time. It doubled, then tripled. She became entirely consumed by Instagram and TikTok. She would lie in bed next to me, the blue light of her phone illuminating her face, endlessly scrolling through the fabricated lives of influencers. She started making offhand comments about the couples she saw online. She would show me a video of some guy surprising his girlfriend with a $10,000 vacation to the Maldives and sigh heavily. "Look how he treats her," she would say, her tone laced with subtle accusation. "He really knows how to make her feel like a queen." I would just look at her, baffled. I had spent the better part of a year sacrificing my physical health to keep a roof over her head, and suddenly I was falling short because I wasn't staging elaborate, camera-ready surprises. The quiet stability I offered was no longer enough. It was boring. She wanted the performative romance. She wanted the drama, the highs and lows, the content she could post to prove to strangers that her life was perfect. I felt the resentment creeping into my chest, a slow burning fire that I constantly tried to extinguish with logic. I told myself it was just a phase. I told myself that the agency culture was temporary, and she would eventually ground herself again. I am not a man who runs at the first sign of trouble. We had 3 years of history. I had invested too much of my soul into her to just walk away because she was going through a shallow phase. So, I bit my tongue. I absorbed the passive-aggressive comments. I tried to plan nicer dates, tried to buy more flowers, tried to bridge the gap between the real world we lived in and the digital fantasy she was obsessed with. But it was like pouring water into a bottomless bucket. The more I tried to accommodate her new standards, the less she respected me. My patience, which I viewed as a sign of maturity and love, was being reinterpreted by her as weakness. You can tell a lot about a person by the company they keep. As Cassidy settled into her new corporate identity, she also acquired a new circle of friends. They were 3 women from the agency: Blair, Daphne, and Carly. Individually, they were exhausting. Together, they were a toxic echo chamber of the worst dating advice on the internet. I started calling them the coven in my head. I had the displeasure of hosting them at my apartment on a Friday night a few months ago. Cassidy wanted to have a wine night, and I retreated to my home office to give them space. However, my apartment is not a mansion, and the walls are relatively thin. I could hear every word echoing from the living room. They were drinking expensive wine that I had bought, and dissecting men like they were defective appliances. Carly was the undeniable ringleader. She had a loud, shrill voice and a completely skewed view of reality. She was constantly preaching this distorted version of feminism where a woman's power was measured by how much she could manipulate her partner. I sat at my desk, listening as Carly held court. "You have to keep them on their toes," I heard her say, her voice dripping with unearned authority. "If a man gets too comfortable, he stops valuing you. You have to train them. You have to test them constantly so they know you have options." Daphne and Blair chimed in with their own stories of playing mind games, of intentionally ignoring texts for 24 hours just to induce panic, of demanding extravagant gifts as apologies for manufactured arguments. And then I heard Cassidy's voice. My girlfriend, the woman I had worked myself half to death for, was agreeing with them. She was complaining that I was too safe. She actually used those words. "Gregory is great, but he's just so predictable now. He knows I'm not going anywhere, so he doesn't really fight for me anymore." I sat in the dark, staring at my computer screen, feeling a profound sense of disgust. Fight for her? I had fought for her survival for 10 months. I had fought off exhaustion to pay her bills. But in the twisted logic of Carly and the Coven, my consistent loyalty was a negative trait. I was a tamed man. I realized then that they were actively poisoning her mind. They were taking my stability and framing it as complacency. I debated walking out there and throwing them all out of my apartment, but my rational brain took over. I thought if I overreacted, I would just be giving them exactly what they wanted, drama. So, I stayed in my office. I maintained my polite facade when they left. But a cold, hard knot had formed in my stomach. The foundation was cracking. It did not take long for the Coven's teachings to manifest in Cassidy's behavior. The invisible tests began. At first, they were small. She would pick a fight over absolutely nothing just before we were supposed to go out, waiting to see if I would cancel my plans to comfort her. When I calmly suggested we talk about it later when she was less emotional, she accused me of being cold. But the first major test, the one that truly showed me how far gone she was, happened 4 months ago. We were out to dinner at a fairly upscale Italian restaurant. The Coven happened to be sitting at the bar waiting for a table, a coincidence that I now highly suspect was pre-planned. Our waiter was a young, attractive guy, probably in his early 20s. From the moment he approached our table, Cassidy turned on a performance that made my skin crawl. She twirled her hair, laughed excessively at his standard customer service jokes, and maintained deep, lingering eye contact with him while ordering. She was overtly flirting with him right in front of me. I glanced over at the bar and saw Blair and Carly watching us, smirking behind their cocktail glasses. It clicked immediately. This was a test. They wanted to see if I would mark my territory. They wanted a scene. They wanted me to puff out my chest, confront the waiter, or yell at her, proving my passion and my fear of losing her. I refused to play their game. I am a 34-year-old professional. I do not compete with 20-year-old waiters for the attention of the woman sitting across from me. If my presence alone is not enough to command respect, then acting like an insecure teenager is not going to fix the core issue. I sat back, ate my meal in complete silence, and watched her perform. When the bill came, I didn't say a word. I pulled out my wallet, paid the tab, left a $50 tip because the waiter looked genuinely uncomfortable with her advances, and stood up. "I am going home," I said calmly. "You can catch a ride with your friends." I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. I drove home, enjoying the silence of my car. An hour later, she stormed into the apartment, furious. She yelled, she cried, she accused me of not caring about her. "Any other man would have been furious," she screamed. "You didn't even care that another guy was hitting on me." "I care about respect," I replied, my voice dangerously low. "And you disrespected me, yourself, and our relationship for the amusement of your friends. I will not fight another man for your basic decency." She had no response to that. She cried and eventually apologized, but the damage was done. The rules of our relationship had fundamentally changed. We were no longer partners. We were a player and a pawn. And I absolutely refused to be a pawn. The restaurant incident should have been the end of it, but I, in my stubborn loyalty, decided to give it one last chance. I set strict boundaries. I told her if she ever pulled a stunt like that again, we were done. She swore she understood. She promised she would stop listening to Carly. But the addiction to drama and social media validation was stronger than her word. 2 months ago, she pulled the stunt that finally broke whatever was left of my heart. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was preparing for a massive virtual meeting with a new client. This was a critical project, a contract worth roughly $10,000 to my firm, and I was the lead presenter. 10 minutes before the meeting was supposed to start, my phone rang. It was Cassidy. She was crying hysterically, her breath catching in her throat. "Gregory, you have to come get me," she sobbed. "My car broke down in the industrial district. There are some guys hanging around staring at me. I'm terrified. Please hurry." My blood ran cold. The industrial district was a rough area, practically abandoned during the day and dangerous at night. Panic overrode every professional instinct I had. I emailed the client a frantic apology, abandoning the $10,000 meeting without a second thought. I grabbed my keys and sprinted to my car. I broke several speed limits getting across town. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I was terrified she was in real danger. It took me 20 minutes to reach the location she had pinged me. I rounded the corner, expecting to see her stranded on the shoulder of the road. Instead, I saw her car parked perfectly fine outside a trendy, hipster coffee shop that had recently opened in a gentrified corner of the district. Through the large glass window, I saw her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't surrounded by threatening men. She was sitting at a table with Blair, drinking an iced latte and laughing, her phone propped up recording them. I parked my car and just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The adrenaline in my system turned toxic, morphing into a cold, dense rage. I had just jeopardized my career, lost a massive contract, and nearly caused an accident because I thought the woman I loved was in danger. And it was all a lie. It was another test. A loyalty test to see if I would drop everything for her. I didn't go inside. I didn't call her. I put my car in reverse and drove back to my office. When she finally came home that evening, expecting to be praised for her clever little test, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I looked at her as if she were a complete stranger. I told her exactly what she had cost me that day. The look of triumph on her face faded into genuine guilt, but it didn't matter. The illusion was completely dead. I realized she viewed my stress, my panic, and my professional reputation as acceptable casualties for her entertainment. From that day on, I emotionally checked out. I was just biding my time, waiting for the final shoe to drop. If you are enjoying this story so far, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you are living in. Every single comment helps the video reach more listeners. Thank you so much. Which brings us to the Friday night that ended it all. It was my best friend Donovan's birthday. Donovan and I have known each other since our freshman year of college. We lived in the same dorm, suffered through the same brutal computer science exams, and navigated our 20s together. He is the exact opposite of the people Cassidy was choosing to surround herself with. Our friendship is built on mutual respect, zero drama, and showing up when it counts. Donovan had just bought his first house, a nice place in the suburbs, and he was hosting a massive housewarming and birthday party combined. Because he is my brother in every way that matters, I left work early. I arrived at his place around 5 o'clock in the afternoon to help him set up. There is a specific kind of peace in physical labor with a good friend. We spent 3 hours moving heavy oak tables, carrying chairs up from the basement, setting up the sound system, and icing down hundreds of bottles of beer in massive coolers on the back patio. We didn't need to talk constantly. We just worked, occasionally throwing a sarcastic comment back and forth. It was a stark contrast to the exhausting, hyper-analyzed world Cassidy lived in. Speaking of Cassidy, she had texted me earlier that afternoon. She informed me that she and the girls were going to arrive later, probably around 9 o'clock. She claimed they needed time to get ready, but I knew the real reason. Arriving early to help was not her style anymore. She wanted to make an entrance. She wanted to walk into a crowded room, dressed to kill, and have all eyes on her. I told her that was fine. Honestly, I preferred it. It gave me a few hours to just be myself, to relax without having to monitor her mood or deal with the judgmental stares of her toxic entourage. By 8 o'clock, the house was starting to fill up. The smell of barbecue drifted from the backyard, the music was a steady, upbeat pulse, and the atmosphere was genuinely happy. I had a beer in my hand, chatting with some old college buddies, feeling relaxed for the first time in weeks. I had successfully compartmentalized the failing state of my relationship, deciding to deal with it after Donovan's weekend was over. I didn't want to ruin his celebration with my personal problems. But Cassidy, as I was about to learn, had no such respect for boundaries. Around 8:30, more guests started pouring into the house. Donovan asked me to go to the hallway closet near the front entrance to grab a stack of folding chairs we had stored there earlier. The hallway was relatively quiet compared to the booming bass of the living room. As I walked down the narrow corridor, I passed the downstairs guest bathroom. The door was cracked open just a few inches, a sliver of warm yellow light spilling out onto the hardwood floor. I was about to walk right past it when I heard a familiar sound. It was Cassidy's distinctive, high-pitched laugh, bouncing off the tile walls. I stopped. I did not mean to eavesdrop. I really did not. But then I heard Carly's voice, sharp and conspiratorial, and my feet refused to move. "Okay, so here is exactly how we are going to do this," Carly was saying. "You need to make sure the timing is perfect. Do not do it while everyone is distracted by the cake. Wait until there is a lull in the music. You will say something like, 'Gregory, this is not working anymore. You do not appreciate me.' You have to use those exact words. It hits the male ego the hardest." My breath caught in my throat. I stood perfectly still, the folding chairs completely forgotten. What were they talking about? "I am going to stand near the kitchen island," Blair chimed in, her voice buzzing with excitement. "The lighting is best from that angle, and it gives me a clear shot of his face. I want to catch every single expression when his heart drops. Oh my God, this is going to be hilarious. My cousin tried this with her boyfriend last month, and the video got almost 1 million views. Make sure you get my good side, too," Cassidy said. My own girlfriend. The woman I had worked until my eyes bled to support. She sounded giddy, like a child planning a prank at a sleepover. I want to look serious but sad. Like I am bravely walking away. Do you really think he is going to beg? What if he just gets mad? "Of course he is going to beg," Daphne interjected, her voice dripping with condescension. "Men are incredibly predictable when their security gets threatened." "He is totally whipped, Cassidy. Remember how he paid your rent for almost a year? A guy who invests that much money into you is not going to just let you walk away in front of all his friends without fighting for you. He will probably get down on his knees. And if he gets mad instead of sad?" Cassidy asked again, a tiny sliver of hesitation in her voice. "Even better," Carly snapped back immediately. "If he gets angry, we make him look like the toxic, abusive boyfriend who cannot handle a woman expressing her boundaries. Either way, you win. You get amazing content for your Instagram, you prove to everyone how much power you have over him, and you get to watch him scramble to win you back. It is a win-win. Just remember, we have your back. If he tries to turn it around on you, we step in and defend you. We will shame him in front of the whole party for not being a good enough man." "Okay," Cassidy said, taking a deep breath. I heard the click of a lipstick tube closing. "I am ready. Let's give him a wake-up call. Let's remind him of what he could lose." They all burst into a chorus of giggles. It was the ugliest sound I had ever heard in my entire life. I did not barge into the bathroom. I did not kick the door open and scream at them. I did not demand an explanation. Instead, I took a very slow, very deliberate step backward. I retreated down the hallway, pressing my back against the cool plaster of the wall near the front door. In the span of about 2 minutes, my entire reality had been dismantled and reassembled into something grotesque. The physical reaction was intense. My chest felt tight, as if a heavy iron band was wrapped around my ribs. The blood roared in my ears, drowning out the muffled bass of the party music. It was not just anger that I felt. Anger is a hot, chaotic emotion. What I felt was a freezing, absolute clarity. It was the death of an illusion. 3 years. I had given her 3 years of my life. I had sacrificed my health, my sleep, and my financial security to build a foundation for us. I had ignored the red flags. I had swallowed my pride when she humiliated me at the restaurant. I had forgiven her when she faked an emergency and cost me a $10,000 contract. I had done everything a good, traditional man is supposed to do. And what was my reward? I was being cast as the pathetic, begging clown in a low-budget social media production, directed by a group of women who despised me simply for existing. She did not want a partner. She wanted a prop. She wanted a human accessory she could manipulate to generate likes, comments, and validation from complete strangers on the internet. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. In through the nose for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out through the mouth for 4 seconds. I am a software engineer. My brain is wired to identify bugs in a system and eliminate them. Cassidy was no longer the love of my life. She was a catastrophic bug in the system of my life, and she needed to be removed permanently. A lesser man might have confronted her right then and there. A lesser man might have caused a scene in the hallway, yelling and cursing. But that would have given them exactly what they wanted: drama. They wanted a reaction. They thrived on emotional chaos. If I blew up, Carly and Blair would just spin the narrative to make me look unhinged. I realized in that quiet, cold moment in the hallway that the only way to win a rigged game is to refuse to play by their rules. They had written a script for the evening. They had assigned me the role of the desperate, heartbroken boyfriend. But they forgot one crucial detail: I had the power to change my lines. I stood up straight, rolled my shoulders back, and smoothed out my shirt. The iron band around my chest dissolved, replaced by a strange, weightless sense of calm. I walked over to the closet, picked up the stack of folding chairs I had been sent to get, and walked back into the living room. I set the chairs down near the patio door, grabbed a fresh bottle of water from the cooler, and leaned against the kitchen island. I was perfectly calm. The trap was set, but I was not going to be the one who got caught in it. It was exactly 9:15. The party was at its peak. There were roughly 40 people crammed into Donovan's living room, kitchen, and the adjoining patio. The music was loud enough that you had to raise your voice to speak, but not so loud that conversation was impossible. The air smelled of grilled meat, spilled beer, and expensive perfume. I stood by the granite kitchen island, taking slow sips of my water, watching the front entrance like a hawk. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and the coven made their grand entrance. They walked in as if they were stepping onto a red carpet. Cassidy was in the center, wearing a tight black dress that I had bought for her last Christmas. Blair, Daphne, and Carly flanked her like Secret Service agents protecting a very minor celebrity. They did a quick scan of the room, their eyes darting around until they found me standing by the kitchen. I watched them deploy. It was honestly fascinating to observe them from the outside, knowing exactly what they were doing. It was like watching a poorly rehearsed high school play. They broke formation and spread out across the room, taking up strategic positions just like they had planned in the bathroom. Blair moved toward the living room bookshelf. She pretended to be looking at the titles, but I could clearly see her sliding her phone out of her clutch, adjusting her grip so the camera lens was perfectly aligned with the space between me and the center of the room. Daphne positioned herself near the hallway archway to block anyone from walking through and ruining the shot. Carly stood near the sofa, arms crossed, wearing a look of smug anticipation. Then it was the star's turn. Cassidy took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself. She wiped the smile off her face, replacing it with an expression of tragic sorrow. It was a good performance. If I had not heard her giggling 10 minutes ago, I might have actually believed she was hurting. She began walking toward me. Her steps were slow and deliberate. As she moved through the crowd, she gently tapped people on the shoulder, murmuring excuses, drawing attention to herself. By the time she reached the center of the living room, about 10 feet away from me, people had started to notice that something was off. The conversations nearest to her began to trail away. People turned their heads. This was exactly what she wanted. She needed an audience. "Gregory," she said. Her voice was slightly louder than necessary, designed to cut through the background music. She paused, letting the silence ripple outward as more guests stopped talking to stare at us. "We need to talk." I set my water bottle down on the granite counter. I did not smile, but I did not frown either. I maintained a completely neutral expression. I looked her dead in the eye. "I am right here," I said calmly. "What is on your mind, Cassidy?" She took another step forward, placing herself perfectly in the center of Blair's camera frame. The living room had grown uncomfortably quiet. Even Donovan, who had been laughing loudly on the patio, stepped inside, sensing the sudden drop in the room's energy. Over 40 people were now watching us, holding their breath. "I have been doing a lot of thinking lately," Cassidy began, projecting her voice so the people in the back could hear. She clasped her hands together in front of her chest, a perfect picture of a woman making a difficult choice. "About us. About where we are going. And I have realized something painful." She paused for dramatic effect. I could see Carly nodding slightly in her peripheral vision, encouraging her to deliver the killing blow. "This is not working anymore, Gregory," Cassidy announced clearly. "You do not appreciate me. You have gotten too comfortable, and I feel completely taken for granted. I need a man who is willing to fight for me, who shows me my worth. I cannot stay in a relationship where I am not valued. I am breaking up with you." A collective gasp echoed through the room. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God." The silence was heavy, absolute, and suffocating. All eyes darted from her to me, waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for me to turn red, to shout, to drop my drink in shock, or, as her friends had predicted, to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the slight tremor of excitement in her hands. I saw the reflection of the overhead lights in her eyes. I saw a stranger. I did not break eye contact. I slowly reached my right hand into my front pocket. I pulled out my heavy keychain. The metallic jingle sounded incredibly loud in the dead quiet room. I used my thumb to separate the spare brass key to her apartment from the rest of my keys. I slid it off the metal ring. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. I extended my hand and dropped the brass key onto the granite kitchen island. It landed with a sharp, definitive clack. "You are absolutely right," I said. My voice was steady, calm, and measured. I did not raise it, but the room was so quiet that my words carried effortlessly. "I believe you. And I accept your decision." Cassidy's perfectly rehearsed sad expression faltered. Her eyebrows drew together in confusion. This was not in the script. "What?" she whispered, dropping her projection. "You said it is not working." "You said you want to break up," I replied, maintaining a conversational, polite tone. "I respect your boundaries. I am not going to force a woman to be with me if she feels unappreciated. You are free." I picked up my water bottle, took a sip, and looked at her with polite finality. "Wish granted," I said clearly. "Do not call me." I turned my back to her and started walking toward the front door. The shift in the room's atmosphere was instantaneous and violent. The smug anticipation radiating from her friends vanished, replaced instantly by absolute panic. "Wait!" Cassidy's voice cracked. It was not a rehearsed, theatrical shout. It was a raw shriek of genuine panic. The script had been completely shredded, and she had no idea how to improvise. I stopped walking and turned back to face her. She rushed forward, grabbing my forearm. Her hands were shaking violently now. "Gregory, wait, you cannot just leave. You are not even going to fight for this? 3 years, and you are just walking away without a word." "I am giving you exactly what you asked for," I replied, looking pointedly at her hand on my arm until she let go. "You dumped me. I am leaving. That is how breakups work." Carly, realizing that their cinematic masterpiece was turning into a catastrophic failure, stepped out from the crowd. Her face was flushed with anger. She marched up to me, aggressively pointing her finger. "You are unbelievable," Carly yelled, trying to take control of the narrative. "She just poured her heart out to you. She just told you she feels neglected, and your response is to just walk out the door? You are a coward. Any real man would stay and fight for the woman he loves. You are proving exactly why she had to do this. I looked at Carly with a mixture of pity and absolute disgust. Then I turned my attention to the 40 guests who were watching us like a tennis match. It was time to burn the theater to the ground. A real man, I repeated, raising my voice just enough to command the entire room. That is an interesting perspective, Carly. Especially considering the conversation I overheard the four of you having in the guest bathroom 20 minutes ago. Cassidy's face turned the color of ash. She stumbled back a step as if I had physically struck her. Carly's aggressive posture instantly crumbled, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. Yes, I continued, projecting my voice clearly. I heard everything. I heard Carly giving you the exact script to use. I heard you discussing how you needed to do this in the middle of the party so you would have an audience. I heard you, Cassidy, expressing your excitement about how this was going to get so many views on social media. Murmurs of shock and disgust began to ripple through the crowd of guests. I turned and pointed directly at Blair, who was still standing by the bookshelf, frozen like a statue. And I heard Blair talking about making sure she got the perfect camera angle from the kitchen island to film my reaction when you tried to humiliate me, I said. In fact, she is still holding her phone up right now. Instantly, 40 pairs of eyes snapped toward Blair. Realizing she was caught, Blair frantically shoved her phone into her purse, her face burning crimson. But the damage was done. The evidence was irrefutable. You did not break up with me because you felt unappreciated, I said, turning back to Cassidy, whose eyes were now welling with real, unscripted tears. You staged a public execution of our 3-year relationship for TikTok content. You treated my dignity as entertainment for your toxic friends. You wanted to test my love? Congratulations. You passed the test. You proved exactly who you are. I did not wait for a response. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out the front door, leaving them standing in the center of a deadly silent room, surrounded by dozens of people staring at them with absolute contempt. The cool night air hit my face as I walked down Donovan's driveway toward my car. I expected to feel a crushing sense of grief. I had just lost a woman I had planned to marry. I had just watched 3 years of my life evaporate in front of a crowd of people. Society tells you that heartbreak is supposed to be immediate and agonizing, a physical pain that doubles you over. But as I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat, the only emotion coursing through my veins was an overwhelming, intoxicating sense of relief. It felt as though I had been carrying a 100-pound boulder on my shoulders for the past 8 months, and I had finally, just simply, put it down. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. The streets were quiet. I drove aimlessly for about half an hour, letting the silence of the car wash over me. No passive-aggressive comments from the passenger seat. No anxiety about whether I was being entertaining enough. No pressure to perform. Just peace. My phone, resting in the center console, began to vibrate. It buzzed once, twice, and then settled into a continuous, frantic rhythm. The screen lit up in the dark cabin, displaying a rapid-fire barrage of notifications. Cassidy, Gregory, please answer me. Cassidy, I am so sorry. It was a stupid joke. Please come back. Cassidy, I am crying so hard I cannot breathe. Please pick up. Cassidy, it is Carly's fault. She pushed me into it. I never wanted to do it. Missed call. Cassidy missed call. Cassidy missed call. Blair. I did not feel a shred of sympathy. Looking at those messages, all I saw was a frantic attempt at damage control from someone who realized she had just destroyed her own safety net. She was not sorry that she did it. She was sorry that her script had failed and that she had been publicly exposed as a manipulator. I pulled the car over into an empty parking lot. I picked up the phone, went into the settings, and turned on Do Not Disturb mode. But that was not enough. I went into my contacts, found Cassidy's name, and muted her message thread. I did the same for Blair, Carly, and Daphne. I did not block them yet. A part of my analytical brain wanted to keep a record of their panic, just in case they tried to spin a false narrative later. But I ensured my phone would not ring or vibrate for them. I drove back to my apartment. The place felt different when I walked in. The phantom echoes of her toxic friends complaining on my couch were gone. I locked the door, took a hot shower to wash off the tension of the evening, and climbed into bed. I expected to toss and turn, replaying the events of the night in my head. But my mind was remarkably quiet. The bug had been removed from the system. For the first time in nearly a year, I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, uninterrupted, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I woke up at my usual time. I made a pot of black coffee and sat down at my kitchen table before finally checking my phone. The notifications folder was a digital graveyard of desperation. There were 42 missed calls and over 60 text messages, almost all of them from Cassidy, with a few panicked apologies from Blair claiming she didn't know what Carly was planning. I read through Cassidy's messages while drinking my coffee. It was like reading a textbook on the stages of grief, accelerated over a 12-hour period. The messages from midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning were bargaining and pleading. I will do anything. I will go to therapy. I will delete all my social media. Please just let me explain. The messages from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning shifted to anger and blame shifting. You are being incredibly cruel by ignoring me. You cannot throw away 3 years over a stupid prank. It is not fair that you are punishing me for listening to bad advice. My friends are toxic, I see that now, but you need to give me a chance. The messages from 6 o'clock in the morning onward were just pure, unfiltered desperation. Voice notes of her sobbing uncontrollably. I deleted the voice notes without listening to them. I put the phone down and went on with my Saturday. I went to the gym. I bought groceries. I lived my life. By Monday morning, the desperation escalated into the physical world. I arrived at my office building to find a massive, incredibly expensive floral arrangement sitting on the receptionist's desk, addressed to me. It was at least $200 worth of orchids and lilies. The card read, "I was blind, but now I see clearly. You are the only man for me. Please forgive my stupidity. I love you endlessly. Cassidy." The receptionist looked at me with a sympathetic smile, probably thinking I had gotten into a minor lover's quarrel. I picked up the heavy vase, walked directly over to the large industrial trash can in the break room, and dropped the entire arrangement inside. Later that afternoon, a massive email hit my inbox. It was thousands of words long. In it, Cassidy detailed the psychological manipulation she claimed Carly had subjected her to. She wrote a sprawling essay analyzing her own insecurities, how the agency culture had warped her brain, and how she had finally cut all ties with the coven. She attached screenshots of her text messages to Carly, telling her to never speak to her again. It was a masterclass in playing the victim. She wanted me to believe that a 30-year-old woman had simply been brainwashed by her coworkers and had absolutely no agency or moral compass of her own. I read the email once, archived it, and went back to writing code. I did not reply. Silence is the most impenetrable armor a man can wear. She made her final, desperate stand on Thursday evening, 6 days after the party. I had just finished cooking dinner when the intercom buzzer for my apartment rang. The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker, sounding apologetic. "Mr. Gregory, I am sorry to bother you, but there is a young woman here. She slipped past me when a resident was leaving, and she is already in the elevator heading to your floor. She says she is your girlfriend." I sighed. "Thank you, Marcus. I will handle it." A minute later, a frantic, rapid knocking echoed through my apartment. I walked over to the door and checked the peephole. Cassidy was standing in the hallway. She looked awful. She was wearing sweatpants, her hair was unwashed and tangled, and her eyes were swollen and bruised, looking from days of crying. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had proudly marched into the party just days before. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. I did not step back to let her in. I stood squarely in the frame, physically blocking the entrance. "Gregory," she choked out, fresh tears instantly spilling over her eyelashes. She reached out to touch my shirt, but I took a half step back, keeping the distance between us. She let her hand drop, looking completely defeated. "Please. Just 5 minutes. I will stand right here. I just need to say it to your face." You have 2 minutes, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I broke, she sobbed. I broke everything. I fired Carly and Blair as my friends. I blocked them everywhere. I realize now how toxic they were, how much they hated seeing me happy with a good man. I was so insecure, Gregory. The girls at the agency, their boyfriends are all rich, buying them cars and taking them to Paris, and I felt so stupid and small. I just wanted to prove to them that you loved me. I wanted to show them that you would fight for me. It was a test, a horrible, stupid test, and I failed it. I am so sorry. I listened to her speech. It was tragic, really. Cassidy, I said quietly, stopping her rambling. Do you know what the worst part of all this is? It is not that you tested me. She looked up at me, sniffling, a tiny spark of confused hope in her eyes. The worst part, I continued, is that you thought my dignity was an acceptable price to pay for your social media validation. You did not want to prove that I loved you. You wanted to humiliate me to gain the approval of 3 miserable women you barely even like. When I worked myself to the bone to pay your rent, that was not enough proof of my love. But me crying and begging on a dirty living room floor for a TikTok video, that was the proof you needed. No, that is not true, she cried, shaking her head violently. It is true, I stated firmly. You traded a man who would have bled for you, just to get a few hundred likes on an app. You showed me exactly where I rank on your list of priorities. You did not just break my trust, Cassidy. You disgusted me. And there is no coming back from disgust. The spark of hope in her eyes completely died, replaced by a hollow, crushing realization that it was truly over. I am closing the door now, I said. Do not come back here. Do not email me. Move on with your life. I stepped back and pushed the heavy wooden door shut. The lock clicked into place with a solid, satisfying thud. I stood there for a moment, listening to her muffled sobbing through the wood. A few minutes later, I heard her slow, shuffling footsteps fade down the hallway toward the elevator. It was finally completely over. The beauty of a small, interconnected social circle is that news travels at the speed of light. The brutality of a small social circle is that it rarely forgives absolute cruelty. I did not have to say a word to anyone about what had happened at the party. Donovan, his girlfriend, and the 40 other guests did the talking for me. Over the next 3 months, the fallout was spectacular. Donovan and I would meet up for a beer on the weekends, and he would give me the updates he heard through the grapevine. The story of the staged bathroom plot spread beyond our immediate friend group and infiltrated their professional network. People despise manipulative behavior, especially when it is exposed so publicly and pathetically. The coven became social pariahs. Invitations to weekend trips and dinner parties dried up. Nobody wanted to be around women who treated people like expendable chess pieces for social media content. The pressure caused the coven to turn on each other, just like cornered animals. Cassidy, desperate to salvage her reputation, went on a campaign blaming everything on Carly and Blair. She told everyone who would listen that she was a victim of their psychological abuse. Carly and Blair, who possessed the emotional maturity of high school bullies, retaliated immediately. They took to their social media accounts, the very platforms they worshipped, and waged a digital war against Cassidy. They posted screenshots of old group chats where Cassidy had complained about me, where she had made fun of other coworkers, and where she had eagerly participated in planning the fake breakup. They exposed every ugly, petty secret she had ever shared with them. The agency they worked for, a place that thrived on public image, did not take kindly to the messy, public drama. While they were not fired, Donovan heard that Cassidy was passed over for a major promotion she had been aiming for, and Carly was quietly transferred to a different, less prestigious department to separate the warring factions. They destroyed their own kingdom. Cassidy had sacrificed a loyal partner and a stable future to impress a group of women who ultimately tore her to shreds the moment it was convenient for them. She ended up completely isolated, forced to navigate the shallow, cutthroat dating pool she had previously romanticized, without the safety net she had so carelessly thrown away. I felt a brief pang of pity for her, but it quickly faded. Karma is not an abstract concept, it is simply the logical consequence of your own actions. It has been 8 months since that Friday night at Donovan's house. Time is a remarkable filter. It strips away the anger and the pain, leaving only the lessons behind. My life looks very different now. My career has accelerated because I am no longer burning the midnight oil to fund someone else's lifestyle. I sleep 8 hours a night. My weekends are quiet, peaceful, and entirely my own. Recently, I started seeing someone new. Her name is Abigail. She is a 32-year-old architect who works hard, speaks her mind directly, and has an incredibly grounded perspective on life. On our third date, the topic of past relationships came up. I told her the condensed version of the story with Cassidy, the staged breakup, the bathroom plot, the obsession with testing boundaries for social media. Abigail set her wine glass down and looked at me with genuine horror. "That is not insecurity," she said firmly. "That is emotional terrorism. Anyone who views a relationship as a game to be won or a partner as a subject to be tested is not capable of actual love. Love is a partnership, not a performance." Hearing her say that was incredibly validating. It reminded me that the world is still full of mature, rational adults who value loyalty over drama. It reminded me that my standards were not wrong. I had just been applying them to the wrong person. I learned the most valuable lesson of my life that night at the party. I learned that your self-respect is the absolute foundation of your existence as a man. If you allow someone to compromise your dignity, you give them permission to destroy you. You cannot control how other people behave. You cannot control if your partner decides to listen to toxic advice, or if they decide that digital validation is more important than real-world loyalty. But you can always control your reaction. You can refuse to be a participant in their circus. You can recognize your own worth, pick up your keys, and walk out the door. The moment you stop being afraid to walk away from disrespect is the moment you become truly untouchable. Some people in our old, extended friend group tell me I should have given her a second chance after she cut off her toxic friends, arguing that 3 years of history and financial sacrifice is too long to throw away over one foolish, manipulated night. Am I wrong for walking away so coldly? Thank you for listening to my story. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and let me know your verdict in the comments below.